deserters flying from British regiments, to drunken loafers who threw whiskey bottles at all who passed, and my still greater good fortune to just escape a maternity case, saying that a fair proportion of the tragedy of our lives out here acted itself in dark bungalows. I wondered that I had met no ghosts. A ghost that would voluntarily hang about a dark bungalow would be mad, of course, but so many men have died mad in dark bungalows that there must be a fair percentage of lunatic ghosts. In due time I found my ghost, or ghosts, rather, for there were two of them. Up till that hour, I had sympathized with Mr. Besant's method of handling them, as shown in the strange case of Mr. Lucraft and other stories. I am now in the opposition. We will call the bungalow Katmaldak Bungalow, but that was the smallest part of the whole. A man with a sensitive hide has no right to sleep in dark bungalows. He should marry. Katmaldak Bungalow was old and rotten and unrepaired. The floor was of worn brick. The walls were filthy, and the windows were nearly black with grime. It stood on a bypath largely used by native sub-deputy assistants of all kinds, from finance to forests. But real sahibs were rare. The Khansama, who was nearly bent double with old age, said so. When I arrived, there was a fitful, undecided rain on the face of the land, accompanied by a restless wind, and every gust made a noise like the rattling of dry bones in the stiff, toddy palms outside. The Khansama completely lost his head on my arrival. He had served a sahib once. Did I know that sahib? He gave me the name of a well-known man who has been buried for more than a quarter of a century, and showed me an ancient daguerreotype of that man in his prehistoric youth. I had seen a steel engraving of him at the head of a double volume of memoirs a month before, and I felt ancient beyond telling. The day shut in, and the Khansama went to get me food. He did not go through the pretense of calling it khana, man's victuals. He said ratub, and that means, among other things, grub, dog's rations. There was no insult in his choice of the term. He had forgotten the other word, I suppose. While he was cutting up the dead bodies of animals, I settled myself down, after exploring the dark bungalow. There were 3 rooms beside my own, which was a corner kennel, each giving into the other through dingy white doors fastened with long iron bars. The bungalow was a very solid one, but the partition walls of the rooms were almost jerry-built in their flimsiness. Every step or bang of a trunk echoed from my room down the other 3, and every footfall came back tremulously from the far walls. For this reason, I shut the door. There were no lamps, only candles in long glass shades. An oil wick was set in the bathroom. For bleak, unadulterated misery, that dark bungalow was the worst of the many that I had ever set foot in. There was no fireplace, and the window would not open, so a brazier of charcoal would have been useless. The rain and the wind splashed and gurgled and moaned round the house, and the toddy palms rattled and roared. Half a dozen jackals went through the compound singing, and a hyena stood afar off and mocked them. A hyena would convince a Sadducee of the resurrection of the dead, the worst sort of dead. Then came the ratub, a curious meal, half native and half English in composition, with the old Khanshama babbling behind my chair about dead and gone English people, and the wind-blown candles playing shadow bo peep with the bed and the mosquito curtains. It was just the sort of dinner and evening to make a man think of every single one of his past sins, and of all the others that he intended to commit if he lived. Sleep? for several hundred reasons, was not easy. The lamp in the bathroom threw the most absurd shadows into the room, and the wind was beginning to talk nonsense. Just when the reasons were drowsy with blood-sucking, I heard the regular, "Let us take and heave him over," grunt of dually bearers in the compound. First, one dually came in, then a second, and then a third. I heard the dualies dumped on the ground, and the shutter in front of my door shook. "That's someone trying to come in," I said. But no one spoke, and I persuaded myself that it was the gusty wind. The shutter of the room next to mine was attacked, flung back, and the inner door opened. "That's some sub-deputy assistant," I said, "and he has brought his friends with him. Now they'll talk and spit and smoke for an hour." But there were no voices and no footsteps. No one was putting his luggage into the next room. The door shut, and I thanked Providence that I was to be left in peace. But I was curious to know where the dualies had gone. I got out of bed and looked into the darkness. There was never a sign of a dually. Just as I was getting into bed again, I heard in the next room the sound that no man in his senses can possibly mistake. The whir of a billiard ball down the length of the slates when the striker is stringing for break. No other sound is like it. A minute afterwards, there was another whir, and I got into bed. I was not frightened, indeed I was not. I was very curious to know what had become of the dualies. I jumped into bed for that reason. Next minute, I heard the double click of a cannon, and my hair sat up. It is a mistake to say that hair stands up. The skin of the head tightens, and you can feel a faint, prickly bristling all over the scalp. That is the hair sitting up. There was a whir and a click, and both sounds could only have been made by one thing: a billiard ball. I argued the matter out at great length with myself, and the more I argued, the less probable it seemed that one bed, one table, and two chairs, all the furniture of the room next to mine, could so exactly duplicate the sound of a game of billiards. After another cannon, a three-cushion one to judge by the whir, I argued no more. I had found my ghost, and would have given worlds to have escaped from that dark bungalow. I listened, and with each listen, the game grew clearer. There was whir on whir and click on click. Sometimes there was a double click and a whir and another click. Beyond any sort of doubt, people were playing billiards in the next room, and the next room was not big enough to hold a billiard table. Between the pauses of the wind, I heard the game go forward, stroke after stroke. I tried to believe that I could not hear voices, but that attempt was a failure. Do you know what fear is? Not ordinary fear of insult, injury, or death, but abject, quivering dread of something that you cannot say. Fear that draws the inside of the mouth and half the throat. Fear that makes you sweat on the palms of the hands and gulp in order to keep the uvula at work. This is a fine fear, a great cowardice, and must be felt to be appreciated. The very improbability of billiards in a dark bungalow proved the reality of the thing. No man, drunk or sober, could imagine a game at billiards or invent the spitting crack of a screw cannon. A severe course of dark bungalows has this advantage: it breeds infinite credulity. If a man said to a confirmed dark bungalow hunter, "There is a corpse in the next room, And there's a mad girl in the next but one, and the woman and man on Dad's camel have just eloped from a place 60 miles away. The hero would not disbelieve, because he would know that nothing is too wild, grotesque, or horrible to happen in a dark bungalow. This credulity, unfortunately, extends to ghosts. A rational person fresh from his own house would have turned on his side and slept. I did not. So surely as I was given up as a bad carcass by the scores of things in the bed, because the bulk of my blood was in my heart, so surely did I hear every stroke of a long game at billiards played in the echoing room behind the iron-barred door. My dominant fear was that the players might want a marker. It was an absurd fear, because creatures who could play in the dark would be above such superfluities. I only know that that was my terror, and it was real. After a long, long while, the game stopped, and the door banged. I slept because I was dead tired. Otherwise, I should have preferred to have kept awake. Not for everything in Asia would I have dropped the door bar and peered into the dark of the next room. When the morning came, I considered that I had done well and wisely, and inquired for the means of departure. By the way, Count-sama, I said, what were these 3 doolies doing in my compound in the night? There were no doolies, said the Count-sama. I went into the next room, and the daylight streamed through the open door. I was immensely brave. I would, at that hour, have played blackpool with the owner of the big black pool down below. Has this place always been a dark bungalow? I asked. No, said the Count-sama. 10 or 20 years ago, I have forgotten how long, it was a billiard room. How much? A billiard room for the sahibs who built the railway. I was Count-sama then in the big house where all the railway sahibs lived, and I used to come across with Brandy Schwab. These 3 rooms were all one, and they held a big table on which the sahibs played every evening. But the sahibs are all dead now, and the railway runs, you say, nearly to Kabul. Do you remember anything about the sahibs? It is long ago, but I remember that one sahib, a fat man, and always hungry, was playing here one night, and he said to me, Mangal Khan, Randi Pani do. And I filled the glass, and he bent over the table to strike, and his head fell lower and lower, till it hit the table, and his spectacles came off, and when we, the sahibs and I myself, ran to lift him, he was dead. I helped to carry him out. Haha, he was a strong sahib, but he is dead, and I, old Mangal Khan, am still living, by your favor. That was more than enough. I had my ghost, a first-hand, authenticated article. I would write to the Society for Psychical Research. I would paralyze the Empire with the news. But I would, first of all, put 80 miles of assessed cropland between myself and that dark bungalow before nightfall. The Society might send a regular agent to investigate later on. I went into my own room and prepared to pack, after noting down the facts of the case. As I smoked, I heard the game begin again, with a miss in bulk this time, for the whir was a short one. The door was open, and I could see into the room. Click, click. That was a cannon. I entered the room without fear, for there was sunlight within, and a fresh breeze without. The unseen game was going on at a tremendous rate, and well it might, when a restless little rat was running to and fro inside the dingy ceiling cloth, and a piece of loose window sash was making 50 breaks off the window bolt as it shook in the breeze. Impossible to mistake the sound of billiard balls. Impossible to mistake the whir of a ball over the slate. But I was to be excused. Even when I shut my enlightened eyes, the sound was marvelously like that of a fast game. Entered angrily the faithful partner of my sorrows, Kadir Baksh. This bungalow is very bad and low caste. I wondered the presence was disturbed and speckled. 3 sets of dually bearers came to the bungalow last night when I was sleeping outside and said that it was their custom to rest in a room set apart for the English people. What honor has the Khansama? They tried to enter, but I told them to go. No wonder these Orias have been here, and the presence is sorely spotted. It is shame, and the work of a dirty man. Kadir Baksh did not say that he had taken from each gang 2 annas for rent in advance, and then, beyond my earshot, had beaten them with a big green umbrella whose use I could never before divine. But Kadir Baksh had no notions of morality. There was an interview with the Khansama, but as he promptly lost his head, wrath gave place to pity, and pity led to a long conversation, in the course of which he put the fat engineer sahib's tragic death in 3 separate stations, 2 of them 50 miles away. The 3rd shift was to Calcutta, and there the sahib died while driving a dog cart. If I had encouraged him, the Khansama would have wandered all through Bengal with his corpse. I did not go away as soon as I intended. I stayed for the night, while the wind and the rat and the sash and the window bolt played a ding-dong, 150 up. Then the wind ran out, and the billiard stopped, and I felt that I had ruined my one genuine, hallmarked ghost story. Had I only stopped at the proper time, I could have made anything out of it. That was the bitterest thought of all. End of section 1. Recording by J.C. Kwan, Montreal, January 2010.